Good morning, everyone. Good morning, beautiful souls, and good morning, beautiful empaths. You're welcome to the page of truth, page of enlightenment, page of freedom, and the page of breaking empaths free. Now, for the new ones, if you're just coming in and narcissism resonates with you, you can always take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. The ones that have always been with me, I welcome you back. Thank you for being part of this tribe, and I thank you for the love and support. Now, this morning, I just did sun gazing. I had a 20 minutes session of sun gazing, and I think I'm going to share some of my tricks. How do I do sun gazing? Because it's one of those things I've learned along my journey. It's something you can do if you want to amplify your vibration. So you're an empath out there, so you know definitely you're full of light. So this is for you. It's a way you can amplify your vibration. And these vampires, whenever they are, those energy vampires, whenever they meet you, they cannot stand your presence. So it's one thing you can do to raise your vibration. I think I might share a video very soon about sun gazing, how you can do that. Of course, you start slowly. Like I used to start with 2 or 3 minute sessions, but now I can do 20-minute sessions. So it's getting better. So it's a very effective way. It's a very effective way to amplify your vibration. Now, today I'm going to talk about my the Denzo exit strategy. No, I'm going to talk about, I promised you guys I will talk about the exit strategy of living a narcissist. So my way, this is Denzo's way. Other people have got some other ways. They have tried and maybe they have worked for them as well, but I'll share with you my way. Now, there may be 3 or 4 things I might mention that will help you to live a narcissist, successfully help you to exit a narcissistic relationship. When I was living a narcissist in the last year of my narcissistic encounter, I realized that I had connected very much with God. So I started praying a lot. But of course, the narcissist was always bothered with my prayers. Whenever I would put all these sessions of the prayers and everything, I started praying. The narcissist was getting bothered, and she didn't like me in that mode of prayer and everything, so she didn't like me watching all those. So I became prayerful to some extent. Of course, I would get my own time, small little time, and I would pray. Now, I don't know what is your faith, but it does not matter. Narcissists can attack Muslims, they can attack Christians, whatever, more Catholics, Buddha, Hindu. It does not matter what is your faith. Narcissism is a global threat. So this is a global problem. Nobody, regardless of your gender, your age, sexuality, orientation, whatever, narcissists are everywhere. So you can use your time to pray. You can pray very hard. Now, what are you praying for? What you're doing, you're asking God. There is 2 things I ask God in particular. I ask God, please, God, if this is the relationship made for me, if this is the marriage made for me, I want you to show me the way I can make it work. That was the first thing I asked God. Second thing I asked God, if this is not the relationship made for me, if this is not the relationship or the marriage made in heaven, I would like you to make the means for me to break away. So I asked God for either mending a very bad situation in my marriage, or designing the means for me to exit this partnership. Now, this was happening. That particular day, I remember when I did that special prayer, I had to travel almost 3 hours to another town. I took a very long trip on the train. And there was a very huge religious conference. So there was this conference I heard about, so I had registered to attend. And I traveled 3 hours to that conference. So in that conference, I was sitting behind, I was sitting at the back. So we were rejoicing, singing and praying and everything. So we're having a very, very, very beautiful coaching. So in the moment of the prayer, I prayed, because it was that time when you need to pray for those things that you want to experience. So I prayed very hard that God should help me see the truth in this relationship. If it's for me, let God actually help me to mend this, because it had gotten very toxic and everything was visible. Help me to mend it, to make it work. Or, number 2, help me to find if it's not the one meant for me, the marriage meant for me, to help me find the exit and make the ways for me to exit this partnership. So those are the two things I asked God. Now, people, anything you're talking about, anytime you're praying, anytime I don't know what is your faith or whatever, whether you're in spirituality, whether you're Christian, Catholic, anything you speak, the moment you start to speak, the moment you speak something and you mean it, you put intention to it and you mean it, you feel it, that thing is going to manifest, because I said that prayer with intention. I said the intention with a lot of faith. I said the intention with feelings. I added emotion to that intention. It was a very serious prayer. So what happened later on, couple of years, no, 1 year later, in that same city I went for the prayer, in that same town. Now, people, I want to explain to you how actually God works behind the scenes. I've always told in my videos, God is working behind the scenes. In that same city I went for the prayer. The same city I went, we had the conference. That is the same town actually where the new supply came from. In that same town, and not very far from the conference center, that is actually where the new supply lived, in that same city. Now, was it a coincidence? No. That was exactly God's plan, because I asked God exactly what I want, and I asked God how I need things to happen. Either they are going to work out, or it has got to end, because it had gotten very toxic and I wouldn't handle this. So in that same town is exactly where I would later on, 1 year, almost a year later, learn that is the same town actually where the new supply actually lived. The new supply who actually started my discard process. That is exactly the same town where I was coming from. So when you're praying, mean it. Say it with faith, say it with intention, add emotions to it, feel it like it's already existing. It has already happened. That was my technique number one, my exit strategy number one. What I did was prayer. Number two, for the ones who are into spirituality and you understand how to use the law of attraction, you know how to manifest your realities. This is what you're going to do. You are initially, prior a couple of months, maybe a year before or 2 years before, you are going to start imagining yourself. You're going to start imagining. You're going to start to visualize. You're going to visualize yourself in a situation whereby you are no longer with the narcissist. Now, what are you visualizing in this moment? You are visualizing yourself already. I did this practice subconsciously. I didn't even know I was visualizing something, because one time I would just sit there and I would visualize myself living somewhere else, just by myself, having my own freedom, living alone, doing what I want to do. And in that visualization, I never saw the narcissist in that visualization. I made sure that I exclude the narcissist from that visualization. So anytime I would visualize, I would close my eyes and I would visualize myself. I would see myself living somewhere alone by myself, having a very good time, enjoying my life, even sometimes not having to worry about my partner or whatever, carrying on with my life and meeting some other beautiful people. I even visualize myself, actually in those days I remember, I even visualized myself helping people who are suffering toxic relationships, because that time I didn't know about narcissism. I visualized myself that I will be helping people, how it will feel to help people, just to come out and to help people who are suffering from toxic relationships, people who are enduring abuse. So all these visualizations, I was doing them even before I left the narcissist. So what I was doing in that time is specifically what was happening behind the scenes. I was starting to create the situation whereby I would be free from the narcissist. So I would be free and I would have left the narcissist by that time. And I would see myself in a new area, a new place, completely new place, in a new room, with new people, even I visualize myself actually. Usually I used to visualize myself with my daughter. Now, when you're visualizing, when you're putting these when you're using visualizations, you're preparing your mind. Subconsciously, you're preparing your mind for this situation. You're telling your mind exactly what do you want to experience. That is why it's very important when you're doing the visualization process. You cannot do a mistake and visualize you with your partner, with the narcissist together. You have got always to cut out the part of the narcissist, and you have got to visualize yourself alone. So the people who don't know how to pray, I don't If you're not prayerful, if you don't have a faith or religion or whatever, that's not a problem. If you're a person who knows how to use the law of attraction, you can use visualization process, and you can always visualize yourself without the narcissist, living your life alone, separately, independently, and happy. It's very important you have to be happy. So that was my second strategy I used, and it worked for me. The third one I can talk about is you are going to start to manufacture the discard. So how did I manufacture the discard? I knew that I was in a very toxic relationship in that time. And I started thinking about how am I going to exit it, because I knew this thing was very toxic, and if I didn't leave, one of us was going to get hurt. Either I would get hurt, of course I was already hurt because I was already with all these sicknesses and whatever, so I'd already started hurting. But I knew that I knew it was going to get to the worst. So I started to prepare the discard. So how do you prepare the discard? Psychologically, what you do, you start to starve the narc. There's a channel I was watching recently. I think that was narc free. There's another coach online I've been watching. I used to watch recently. And she had some short videos about the project of starving the narc. So in my own way, how I used to do that, I think 2 years before the final discard, I had already prepared for this discard. So when you're preparing for the discard, what happens is that you start to withdraw the supply. You start to withdraw the fuel. What are you doing by that? You stop into sleep with the narcissist. So what happens is that because you know the person is toxic, eventually when somebody is very toxic and abusive, you're not attracted to them sexually. Even if you decide to sleep with them, you're just doing it for them. You're not doing it for yourself, you're just doing it for them. Just to make them happy and maybe to create some peaceful situation at home, even just for a short period of time. So you're doing it for them. You're not doing it for yourself. You're retracting, you're reducing, or even sometimes you're starting to cut on the supply. You're stopping to sleep with them. Of course, maybe you've been sleeping to them a couple of times a week. This time is one time, or even none at all. 2, you've been going together for things like small walks in the park, or you've been going together sometime on the shopping or the restaurants. Now you're starting to get bored. The more boring you make it for a narcissist, the more boring you make it for them, is the more actually you're going to push them out to go and look for a new source of supply. So you're actually manufacturing the new supply yourself. You're starting now to manufacture this the exit of this relationship. So my case, what I did in this case, I started to cut on the fuel. Number 1, I started to cut on the conversations. I used to like to talking. Sometimes I'm talking, we're sharing a lot of ideas. I stopped all of a sudden talking. I cut on the fuel. I cut on the conversations. I stopped sexual contact. I reduced the sexual contact as well. Sometimes I would even go months without sex. You're doing it psychologically to punish the narcissist, and by doing that, even though they will not tell you, they are going to start to run out and to look for alternative sources of supply. So that's what happens in the narcissist mind, because when you start, they will feel abandoned. They feel like they've been rejected. They feel that abandonment and rejection. So what they will do, even if they're not ready to discard you that time, they are going to start looking outside for an alternative source of supply. So I didn't even know that in that moment when I was cutting on the fuel, I was actually accelerating my discard. So I did it before. Most of those things I would do them specifically to cut the fuel I've been given to the narcissist. So if I was a person who loved to cooking for the narc, I stopped cooking all of a sudden. We used to go out in the shops, whatever, do things in the shops, shop together, whatever, go around, take a walk. I cut all those things, and I made sure that the narcissist starves. Because they like attention, so you stop to give them the attention they need. You cut the attention, you stop to give them the attention. When you do that, the narcissists actually, they feel it. And what they do, because they are not ready to discard you at that time, so what they do in that process, they start to look for an alternative source of supply. They will go online, they'll start running with their phones in the bathrooms or whatever. They will start to run with their phones and going online to scramble, because now they know that the discard is very soon. Then the reason why the narcissist is not discarding you, a narcissist cannot handle a discard. A narcissist cannot wake up in the morning and somebody has discarded them, they are very much afraid about rejection. So they always want to plot the discard themselves. They want to initiate this discard. They want to be the boss in this thing. They want to be the ones to start up a discard. So what they will do, as you're cutting off the fuel, you're starving the narcissist. You're actually psychologically rejecting them. It's like you're abandoning them and even rejecting them. You have stopped to go for the holidays. You're no longer cooking for them. You're no longer speaking with them. You don't want to sit with them. You do not give them any attention whatsoever because you understand they're toxic. And you feel any moment you sit down with them, it is almost another moment in hell. So you are now stopping to give them the attention they need. And because you're starving them of attention and they need that fuel, they are going to scramble online and start to look for alternative sources of fuel. And that is when the new supply is going to come in. So for me personally, I was just shocked to see that actually that same city, the same town, even not far from the conference center where we had that religious conference, the place where we went for the prayers, I set out a very serious intention, not knowing that actually sometime later that intention would manifest. So that intention manifested, and God actually, from that same town where I set the intention, that is where the new supply came from. So most of the time, when you're talking about leaving the narcissist, you have got to understand that everything is psychological. Everything starts in the brain. You can leave the narcissist in two ways. You can leave them physically and you can also leave them emotionally. But before you are able to finally discard and to beat the narcissist at their own game, to finally discard, understand what a discard is, you finally discard the narcissist, you need to understand that it is very important, first of all, to discard the narcissist emotionally. That is the most important thing. If you want to be successful in this game, you have got to break the codes emotionally. It does not matter how far you run away from them, how long you're away from them, how far you go. If you have not cut the codes emotionally, one way or the other, those guys are going to come back in your life. All of a sudden, you just see them in life. Even before you know it, you wake up in the morning and they're next to you. Before you know it, and you will not know how it happened. The secret is breaking the emotional codes. So when you're doing all these things, starving the narcissist, stop shopping with them. Deny them beautiful, nice conversations. Don't sit with them on the movie. Don't cook for them. Make sure that you're not available. You are not emotionally available. When you're doing that psychologically, the narcissist is going to start scrambling for alternative sources of supply, because they are going to start to feel that the discard is about to happen, and they do not want you to be the person to discard them. They want to do the discard first. So that's what happened in my situation. I withdrew my supply almost 2 years before the discard. All the things I used to do, I stopped doing all the things we used to do together as a family. I stopped doing everything. The only attention I had for myself was with my daughter. That's all. The other things were not important for me in the home. I completely withdrew my attention at home. And that is how the narcissist actually slowly but eventually started to look for somebody else. They do it many ways. They do it online. Sometimes they can call friends. If they cannot connect them with somebody or whatever, they can always find a way. The narcissists, they are very clever and very tricky. So they can always find their way how to find an alternative source of supply. But when they do that, now, that is when they are going to be able to discard you. And that is why it is very important for you to prepare for the discard, because the exit strategy, why am I telling you the exit strategy? You are planning, you are preparing yourself for this discard, because when the discard comes, yes, it is going to take you by surprise, because you will not know when they are going to do it. But by that time when it happens, you have already started preparing psychologically. You have started preparing yourself for this discard. So that's what usually happens with the narcissist. You need to prepare yourself emotionally before you leave them. I've given you 3 ways. It's prayer. You need to pray as much as you can. Number 2, Number 2 is using the law of attraction. So you're visualizing yourself out of that relationship, living by yourself somewhere, happy, doing your own things, what you want to do, with going where you want to go, with which people you want to be with. Another way I've given you is starting to manufacture this discard prior by using the what do they call it? By withdrawing the supply from the narcissist. That means that you're stopping to do all the things you used to do. You're starving the narcissist. That is the third way. And believe me or not, before you know it, the discard is going to happen. But already, remember, you have already prepared for this discard prior to it happening. You have already done some of the moves before. So it won't be as much as painful as it will be if they will just take you by surprise. So you have already started preparing even before the discard happens. That is why actually I was successfully able to leave the narcissist, because I had already started preparing myself before. Of course, I was hoovered, like I said, I was hoovered once because my emotions were not yet intact. I was not yet in touch with myself, but I was hoovered once. But when I got back, God confirmed to me that, no, you asked me. For me, it was a very big confirmation from God. God was actually telling me that, no, you asked me that you didn't want to stay with the toxic individual. So even when they hovered me, God continued showing me all the signs I needed to see, and that is when actually my awakening took place, and I was able to leave the narcissist for good. People, if this video makes sense, let me know in the comment section below. I love you all, and remember, sun gazing, that's the secret to amplify your vibration. Otherwise, much love and blessings, and I wish you a beautiful weekend.